Hello, welcome to part 5 of our living room environment tutorial. When last I left you, we had just finished working on the carpet and the walls, the texture mapping for those. So now we're going to get in and work on the ceiling. And as you can see, it's a little difficult to see because the Blender default lighting is this light right here, and even though it's not really throwing shadows, it's not lighting up the underside of anything. So let's go to our front view by hitting 1 on the numpad, and then we'll hit the 5 button like we did when we were modeling this stuff out. We'll go to the front orthographic view, and let's grab our light source right there and just drag that down, and we can put it in the room. We can just put it over here. Maybe we'll put it about right there. Then if we go to our side view, let's move it to where it's slightly outside the scene. It's like maybe we have a floor lamp standing here beside the door. So now we can see the ceiling. Okay, so let's go back to our perspective view, 5 on the numpad, and let's go ahead and start working on the ceiling. Now, we need a texture for that, so let's jump back to our cgtextures.com. My internet seems to be working again now. So we'll go to Plaster, and now we'll say Ceiling. Choose the ceiling there. And load this up, and there's a bunch of different dirty ceilings, like if you're creating like a, an abandoned house or something, like a haunted house maybe, or something, just a cheap apartment or something that's kind of dilapidated. You got plenty of textures for that, but we're kind of working on just a clean looking popcorn style ceiling, the old 80s version, old 60s, 70s, and 80s version, where it's kind of tiny little spiky little things. So there's not really many options under ceiling, so let's see what it looks like under loam walls. Maybe we can find something in there again. So this one might be an option. I'll go ahead and click that one with my middle mouse button to open it in a new tab so I can come back and look at it later. Scroll down, and these are all a little too colorful. I'd like just basically a white or an off-white if I can find one. So let's see what we got. One more page there. I know we looked at these earlier, but that was when we're looking for walls. So let's just look at the white plaster here. Yeah, that'll give us a few options, maybe. Let's see. It's got 3 different pages here. I might go with this one. Let's click that one into a new tab. And this one will probably work right here. Let's look at that one. I think that'll do. That'll do. So I'm just going to right click on the link there, save it as, and just save it in the same folder as the others. Now I could go back and save a larger version of the wall, but I think what we have works. Let's go ahead and name this one ceiling.jpg. Okay. Go ahead and minimize that back. And now we'll grab our tab and go back to our object data, and we'll go to our ceiling UV map now, tab into edit mode, and select only the ceiling. So we're going to do like we did on the floor. And let's look at this so we can see which way to arrange this. We got these 2 lines up here more towards the front of it. So I'm going to select the vertex there, and I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. I'll have to do it over here in this window. Rotate it 90 degrees. And you can see it rotated it kind of opposite the way I wanted. I want those 2 lines to be more towards the bottom of the image rather than the top. So I'm going to say negative. It's going to rotate it negative 90 degrees. So we'll scale that up till it gets to the edges of that boundary. Excuse me. And now we will select the inverse. Okay, and I'll select the walls and the floor, and we can do like we did on the floor. Just select all those, Control L, and also this guy here, Control L, and just move those up out of the way. And now we'll load up that image of our ceiling. Okay, load that, and now we'll select the ceiling items again, and for some reason it didn't want to load that in the right place, so we'll just do that again. Okay, so now we have that visible in our scene here. Doesn't look very visible, but I guess we'll have to add it here as a material as well. So go to your material tab, make sure you got your ceiling selected. Now go to our textures. Scroll all the way up again. It likes to be consistent with the scrolling there. If you're scrolled way down here, messing with the influence, on this material, when you go back to another material, it'll still be scrolled down even though there's nothing there. So we'll just say new, and we'll call this one ceiling. Okay. Now change that one to image or movie. And we can click the thumbnail again since we already loaded the image in the scene. Choose ceiling. Now we got it mapped on there. Okay, so now let's collapse that guy. And under mapping, let's change that. Let's see what 5 looks like. Kind of adds a square effect because that's not a seamless texture that we picked. But I think that'll be okay. Maybe not 5. Let's just try twice. Maybe. No. We could take that into Photoshop and clean it up, but we'll not mess with that. We'll just go ahead and put it 5. That looked like just basically drop tile ceiling sort of. So I don't like that. Let's pick let's pick a different texture. Maybe one of these guys. This one will probably work. You can take a look at it. Seamless though. Okay, yes, we'll use this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this smaller image since it tiles easily enough. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to replace that ceiling image that we just got before. So I'm going to save that, and I want to replace it, yes. Okay, so we'll minimize that. Now what we need to do is refresh Blender's version of this image. It already has the old one loaded in there, but we replaced the old one with a new one. So we need to say image, reload image, and it'll load that little one in there. So now we have a little bit better looking texture up there. Now it's really dark, kind of yellow. It almost matches the walls, which I don't want it to be yellow. I want it to be white. So what we can do is open our colors tab, and we can change the colors here. Of course, if we make it 0, 0, 0, it probably is going to make it a black screen. So we don't want that really. We'll set that back to 1 on each one of those. I'll just change the saturation over here. I'll set that to 0. Now we're not going to see it in our window until we render it, but we can get an idea what it's going to look like over here. So right now it's set to a gray instead of the yellowish color. So I want to change it to more of a white. So I'm going to increase the brightness about like so, maybe 1.2, and the contrast as well, maybe 1.2. That might be a little too bright now. I'll change that to 1.1. I think that'll probably be fine. Okay. So we got the mapping set, and that's probably okay on the amount of mapping. So we'll come down here, turn on geometry for that as well. And like I was talking about on the walls, I want to change those specs to come down instead of going up. So I'm going to set that to -1, and 1 is a little bit too much, so let's up that. Let's try the -0.2 that we were playing with on the walls. So that'll probably be okay. All right. So now we got our main floor, ceiling, and walls all set. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I've been saving incrementally whichever part of tutorial we're on, which right now we're on part 5, so I saved it with an _05. So just to keep things separated. Okay, now what I want to do is create a nice clear window with a view. Let's put a view out here, otherwise it's just gonna be gray. We won't see anything. So let's go back to our CG textures and close this window, and let's just see if we can find maybe just a scenic scene. We'll just go to nature, and we can bring up some different imagery there. Seems like there was something nice on the home page. So right now this all loads in frames. So if you want to go back to the home page, all you have to do is go up to the address bar and just hit enter again, and it'll reload all that. So okay, if I click on the nature tab, which basically where I just was, it'll show a few of these. So let's look. How about forests? Click in there. This is all going to be aerial views, looks like. Oh, not necessarily. Okay, this one looks okay. Maybe let's take a look at a couple more. Kind of depends on where you want your house to be. Where in your mind you're creating this house, you're putting it anywhere on the earth. Where do you want it to be located? So I'll just go ahead and use this guy. Okay, there's a few different images in that one, so that'll give us some options. Let's go with... Ooh, if it gives us different options, you know where I would put a house? It would be on a beach somewhere. So let's look for beach. Looks like we have 169 images for beach. See if we scroll down and see any palm trees or something like that. Might have to actually search for palm trees. Landscapes. Oh, there we go. I didn't see that till just now. Landscapes. Let's click that one. I bet there's a bunch. Yes, tropical. That's what I want. Yes, look at this beautiful scenery. All right, this one right there. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to right click. Let's use a bit bigger version this time. I'm going to click on the medium one now. Save the link as. And I'll just leave the name as is, Landscape Tropical. Go ahead and save that. Okay, now we'll go back to Blender. And now there's one quick little thing we can do to easily bring that tropical landscape in, or whichever landscape you chose to get. And it'll bring it in. We won't have to worry about adding a material for it or anything. It'll do it automatically. And what that's called is import images as objects. I believe that's what it's called. So we have to go to the user preferences, and if we go down to import export, we'll see import images as planes. That's what it is. It's kind of grayed out, but once we select that checkbox right beside it, it'll turn it on, and then we can X that out. And if we go File, Import, you can see down at the bottom it says Images as Planes. So we're going to click on that guy, go to our Textures tab, and say Landscape Tropical, or again, whichever landscape you choose, and Import Images as Planes. And you can see it added it to our scene right there, already mapped onto an actual geometric plane. So now all I have to do is rotate that on the x-axis 90 degrees. Okay, and we'll go and scale it up. Go to our side view, orthographic side view, and let's move that to just outside the window. So we're going to be able to see it. If we go to our front view and line it up this way as well, we'll be able to see that image outside the window. Now, as it is right now, it's going to get shadows thrown onto it. It's going to get some different shading because it's basically at this point it's basically a painting on this canvas. So if we want it to actually look like it's an actual outside scene, we need to have it so it's not getting any shadows or any shading or anything on it. The way we do that is under our Material tab, we go down here and we can turn Shadeless on. We turn that on, you can see it now. It's glowing. Once we get that window turned into glass, we'll be able to see that through there with no shadows being thrown onto it. So that'll be nice. So speaking of the window, let's go ahead and grab that glass window. Make sure we've got it. Yep. And tell you what, let's go ahead and name that. We didn't name any of these objects, but if you wanted to name them, it's going to be right here in your. If you hit the N button, it'll bring up your Properties panel, which is what this whole thing on the right side here is. Scroll down to Item. You can see this one is named Plane.001. I'm going to go ahead and name this window Glass. Okay. And now we're going to create a new material. And we'll call this one Glass. And go ahead and set the diffuse all the way up. Let's give it a tiny bit of a blue tint. In cartoons, comic strips, comic books, things like that, the windows are usually have a bluish tint to them. And we also want to make the specular way up. Now, one thing I've found to make the specular look a lot shinier for such items, glass items are typically shiny. We can change the type of specular it is. Right now it says Cooktor. I believe it's short for Cooktorrent, which I honestly don't know what it means. But all of these have a little bit different visualizations. I found that the word ISO looks fine, and I don't like it just because it's my last name, but it seems to work better for shiny objects. As you can see now, that sphere looks a lot shinier with that on there. Now the intensity is going to be the same. We can leave that at 0.5, it'll be fine. But the slope, that changes basically the hardness of it that the other images had. So we'll set the slope down a little bit. If we choose our monkey, we can see it again a little bit better. 0.035. That's a nice even number, so we'll leave it at that. Now, if we want to turn it transparent, we have to turn on transparency. So if we click that little box right there, scroll down a little bit, we have three different options for transparency here. The first one is mask, and basically what that does is if you're going to be compositing some images together, like say for instance live footage on top of CGI or vice versa, and you need to have a piece of it masked out in the scene, this is what you would choose. You would choose mask, and it would make that a transparent, like if you exported it as a transparent PNG with a transparency on it, that mask would make that section, whatever is that material, would make that part of the transparent PNG. But we don't want that. We want Z transparency will probably work for these purposes. If you're making a glass object like a bowl or something like that, you want Raytrace. And let me show you what it does. Right now the alpha is set to 1.0. That means it's 100% non-transparent. If we scroll that down, the further we get, you can see the more transparent our monkey head becomes, the window starts becoming transparent. We want to make that, in a perfect world, it would be 0%. Perfectly clean glass, but we don't want that because it would look like a hole in the wall rather than a window. So let's set that up just tiny bit visible. Let's go 0.2, and that'll give it a tiny bit of this sheen, and you'll be able to see through it and also know that there's actually something there rather than it just being perfectly transparent. Now, the Z transparency is for things like, I don't know, like saran wrap or something like that, that doesn't need to throw any, refraction, which is what, when something passes through glass and it kind of changes shape on the other side, that's called refraction. So we don't really need any of that in this flat window. But like I said, if you're making a bowl or, a glass menagerie, something like that, you would want to go with Raytrace. And right now, the Raytrace is set to 1.0, which is basically still transparent. IOR is the index of refraction. So right now it's 1.0, that means there's no refraction. So if we change that up a little bit, if you look into our monkey head, you can actually start seeing it starts to look like a marble, or that it's made out of glass. So if you're making, like I said, any a goblet or wine glass or something like that you might have made before, if you want to actually make it look nice when you render it, you would give it a Raytrace alpha transparency there. But like I said, we don't need that now, so we'll just go to Z transparency. Okay, now also one thing that you might want to do with glass, since it's so shiny, is it might have a little bit of a reflection, and what you need to turn on for reflection is mirror. So we'll check that and expand that one out there, that tab out. And right now reflectivity is set to 0. That means it's not reflecting anything. Now if we set it all the way to 1, it would be basically like a mirror. So just to get a better representation of what it would look like, I'm going to turn off transparency for now. You can see it looks like it's, the evil T-1000 from Terminator 2. It looks like it's liquid metal, basically. It's completely reflective. And it's like a mirror. So if you had a mirror in your scene, you might want to use this. So we don't have a mirror, we just have a window. We want it to have a very slight reflection. So I'm going to set that to 0.15. You can kind of see it's still reflecting that grid pattern around there, but it's not so much that it's a mirror. It's just a shiny object slightly reflecting its environment. Now if it's perfectly clean and perfectly shiny, it's going to have a nice stark reflection. If I get the sphere, you can see it a little bit better. It's going to have a nice sharp reflection. But if it's a little if it's a little grimy or dirty, it's going to soften that reflection up. And the way you can soften that reflection up is right here under the gloss. Right now the amount is, it's 100% glossy. So that means it's a nice sharp reflection. If I change that down a little bit, say to 0.85, you can see that reflection starts getting a little softer. So it's still shiny and reflective, but it's not as spick and span, or it's not as reflective as it could be. So if you even go even further, 0.5, you kind of start losing the reflection altogether the lower you go. So let's say 0.75, and you can still kind of see it. And it's a little softer, but since it's a glass window, we'll go ahead and leave that to 1.0. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn transparency back on. We now have a transparent glass paned window that also will reflect the backs of our chairs and things like that just a little bit. Okay, so that's good on that. Let's go ahead and let's see, what can we do. Got 19 minutes in. Let's go ahead and work on getting the coffee table mapped out. Or you know what? Let's go ahead and call this an end to part 5, and we'll leave the mapping of the coffee table and couches for the very last part. So that's going to be it for this part 5. Keep on trucking, and I'll see you in part 6.